A new study uncovers how civil wars and conflict can affect wildlife in countries where there is ongoing fighting. Researchers discovered the main impacts on native wildlife were indirect. Deborah Pata explains.
The bottom line here is that humans are generally not good news for wildlife populations, both during war and peacetime. This particular study focused on the impact of the Angolan civil war on endemic wildlife populations, and interestingly found that the result was mostly indirect, that it was from sociological, socioeconomic, and other institutional changes as a result of conflict rather than direct military tactics and intervention. Increased access to automatic weapons and the suspension of anti-poaching patrols were also leading causes of wildlife population collapse, while the installation of military bases within core conservation areas, overhunting of large-bodied mammals, and new settlements of displaced refugees also strongly impacted species. And even during post-war peace times, wild mammal populations fail to recover as long as people living in those war-torn countries remain armed and wildlife management regulations cannot be enforced. In Angola, 20 out of the 26 species studied were 70% lower after the war compared to before, particularly elephant populations. And significantly, this decline was not reversed by the end of the post-war period from 2002 to 2017. And this is certainly something we saw in places like the Great Lakes region in Africa, which is home to the largest population of mountain gorillas, straddling the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. The DRC has been beset by civil war and conflict for over 2 decades, and armed militia groups still live in places like the Virunga forest. And when we visited there to cover the effect of Ebola on the mountain gorillas, we could only travel with an armed convoy of soldiers. And even in the forest, we had constant armed protection when trekking to the gorilla site. But the armed guards were there to protect us not from wildlife, but from humans. What we've also seen in places like the DRC, where there are still over 30 armed militia groups operating, is that these groups often live in the forest and often eat mid-level predators. And that's contributed to a decline in animal populations and pushed the gorilla's habitat much higher up the mountain. This also means that these mid-level predators are being wiped out as a source of food. So communities are eating animals like bats, which has also had consequences for the spread of Ebola because they carry the virus. And in Rwanda, during the genocide, gorillas were eaten as bushmeat. Throughout that region, the numbers plummeted during the conflict, and really it's only in the last few years that there has been an increase in gorilla populations. Currently, there are over 1,000 left in the world, making them a critically endangered species. And in addition, they're also susceptible to all our human viruses like the flu, Ebola, and of course, the coronavirus. Currently, there are no international mechanisms in place to protect vulnerable wildlife populations in the world's trouble spots, and the authors of this report have called for robust international policies to be effected and warn that if this is not the case, we could see wildlife populations fail to recover or even decline over the next few decades. Tanya?
Deborah Pata, thank you so much.